All right. So first of all, let's get started. Welcome to tonight's program that I'm going to give you on pre-existing conditions. I'm going to show you the law of pre-existing conditions. Some of you don't know me, and I'll introduce myself formally here in just a bit, but I formally got a law degree in 2013, and my thesis was on pre-existing conditions. But what I'm going to tell you tonight is it's more than pre-existing conditions. I mean, right now, if you have problems with attorneys not paying you full boat, you have a problem with what I'm going to discuss tonight. Right now, if you have problems with developing relationships with attorneys, you have an area right now that I'm going to show you tonight. I'm going to improve your ability to get patient results, your own understanding of the conditions that you currently treat, so that you can do whatever you want to in the injury space. I'm a doctor that says an injured patient should go to a doctor that's in at least the top 20% of the bell curve. So what I'm going to tell you, start off by saying tonight, is that pre-existing condition problems are actually not pre-existing condition problems. It's a lack of understanding, usually, of the actual injury. And that's causes probably more problems than pre-existing conditions do. But I'll explain actually as I go. Now, in the US injury market, if you look at the results, and I look at the results, and it's pretty much the blind leading the blind. Now, I may not have the blind on the call tonight, but if you can relate to the fact that much of what you see in your market, if you're not blind, is the blind leading the blind. Now, if you can see in this market, you can lead whoever you want to lead. You can do whatever you want to do in this market. And so that's what I'm going to be showing you. Hopefully tonight, maybe I'll increase your vision just a little bit, increase your ability to navigate these things. Pre-existing conditions and the problems associated with it cause problems all the way down the line for any doctor that's in the market. They cause problems for the attorneys that are in the market. The attorneys are particularly problematic because what I'm going to show you tonight, they do not understand at all, but it becomes a great opportunity for you to educate them. I also educate them in what's called a Smart Injury Lawyers program, where we educate them on the same things you're going to learn tonight. Pre-existing problems are also a serious problem for the insurers because they don't fully understand them. And so it is the blind leading the blind. So those of you that don't know me, my name is Dr. Kronk. First of all, I'm a guy. I'm a father, I'm a husband, I'm a grandfather, I'm a kid by nature. I've been in this space for a long time, licensed doctor of chiropractic for 31 years, treated for 17, did 175 plus thousand office visits myself. That's where I went in and said, "Hey, how you doing, Mr. Smith?" I developed 2 national spinal ligament testing companies. I'm currently the CEO of a medical testing company called Spinal Kinetics. I developed the software and the algorithm that our radiologists used for their reads. I've also now helped to develop an auto detection or an AI product for spinal instability and excessive motion testing in the market. We'll be releasing that into the imaging center market this year, end of this year, beginning of next year. So I'm a published ligament injury researcher, not heavily published, but published. And I've developed an online training program for doctors and also for lawyers in the injury space. So when I say that the biggest issue is understanding the injuries, all injuries are derangements of body parts. So obviously these are all upper extremity injuries. Now, if a person actually fell and they came into your office and this was the injury and this was the picture that you took, do you think that anybody would say, well, how do you know this, if this is a pre-existing condition or not? Now, what if this patient has had 6 wrist injuries prior to this injury? Would it matter? Well, it would matter if they had this and then they injured it worse. But no, the question is no, or the answer is no, it wouldn't matter, right? There's no one that in the injury space that's going to say, well, how do we know this wasn't a pre-existing condition? And how do we navigate this pre-existing condition problem? Okay, as insanely simple this is, the spinal injury is just as simple, but you have to understand the injury. So you have to understand, what does an active injury look like in the spine? So that's what we're going to go over tonight. Obviously, in the spine, if we say that all injuries are derangements to body parts, spinal injury derangements that are possible are fractures, disc herniations, and support ligament damage that causes excessive motion and spinal instability. That's it. Those are the three injuries, right? So if you're looking at the spine, that's it. We have to know these cold, or we're going to always have pre-existing condition problems, always. So spine is just bone and connective tissue. 220 specialized ligaments hold these bones and joints in alignment. They also hold the 23 discs in their alignment as well. So these ligaments are designed to hold the parts in alignment. This ligament is built for shock absorption, and when it herniates, it actually has a very specific finding to it. When the support ligaments are damaged, they cause excessive motion. Support ligaments in the craniocervical junction cause excessive motion. There's no disc up here. So you have to understand if you didn't know what a wrist injury looked like, if you had no clue what a wrist injury looked like, you might think that's normal. Now, you would definitely have a problem with pre-existing conditions if you thought that was normal. So we got to know what the injuries or what the fresh derangements look like. So when we look at an injury can be gotten anywhere. It can be gotten at work, in a public place, in an auto accident, in a sports-related incident, at home. Where you get the injury does not make a difference. The injuries are the same. If I burn you with a blowtorch at work, it's a work-related burn. If I burn you with the same blowtorch at home, it's called a home-related injury. The injury is the same. It doesn't matter where you get the injury is the same. Now, when we look at excessive motion injuries, and this is definitely not a full educational program on these injuries. When we look at excessive motion injuries, that's where the majority of symptoms come from. If we look at disc herniations, there's generally two bad effects. Now, if we look at fracture, we're not really going to look at fracture tonight. Nobody has a problem with fracture. If you fracture your spine and you're quadriplegic, nobody's going, well, what about the pre-existing condition? Hey, they had an auto accident 6 years prior. Now, that's a very dramatic, where I'm dramatically showing you, wow, yeah, no one would have a problem with that. Okay, well, I'm going to show you just as dramatically how to not have a problem with the spinal injury. But you have to know how to work up the injuries in the first place. So disc, if I go to Medscape, pain and radicular pain, two most common symptoms. If I go to the support ligaments, wow, lots of symptoms, lots of problems associated with these. So I first have to know the injuries. I got to know the injuries. If I don't know the injuries, pre-existing conditions, and I don't know how to work them up properly, then I'm always going to suffer with this problem. And I'm always going to suffer with low payment, 50% cutbacks, being a commodity, competing in the attorney market with every other provider that's out there saying the same stuff. Hey, we got a great staff. We document good. We love to take care of your patients, your people. We're friendly. We're easy. And everybody's saying the same thing. And when that happens, you become a commodity. And then what happens is it goes, hey, who's the lowest? Who's the least expensive? And that's what's actually occurred. That's occurred a lot in the injury market for the lack of this information. So obviously, when we damage a spine, we're talking about compressive forces and shear forces, because that's how spinal injuries happen. Compressive and shear force, compressive and shear force, compressive and shear force, compressive and shear force. Compressive and shear force can cause fracture. But if it doesn't cause fracture and you say the spine's injured, it has to be a connective tissue injury. And if you're not working up the connective tissue injuries, again, not for tonight, you're always going to have problems. And if you don't know how to work them up, you want to learn how to work them up. You want to learn how to expertly work them up. And you want to learn how to communicate, like I'm showing you tonight, in very simple terms. So we got disc herniation and we got excessive motion. This, by the way, is a facet injury. It's a severe facet injury. So all that you're trying to do as a doctor of chiropractic is stabilize this and this. You're trying to stabilize this so that they don't need to go to pain management for injections. You're trying to stabilize it so they don't have to go to pain management for nerve burns. You're trying to stabilize this so they don't have to have spinal fusion surgeries. You're trying to stabilize this so they don't have to have minimally invasive disectomies. That's what you're doing. Now, I'm going to use something really simple. Here's a car, right? Now, this car, it could be older, but it's a car. It has no injury. Somebody hits it. It has an injury now. This derangement of the parts of this car is an injury. If we repair it, it's now repaired, and it has what we call a dormant pre-existing condition. It has been traumatized before, but it's not problematic now. Now, stay with me. If this car was hit and 2 weeks later, the guy that owned the car didn't have time to get the car in, but it still drove, so he's still driving it around, just like your patient that's in a spinal injury, they're still going to work, they're still doing their things. Okay, if that car was in a further, let's say somebody hits it right here in the front again, 2 weeks later, but now the roof is buckled, the windshield is broken out, the door is sprung. It would be very easy with 2 pictures to go, okay, what's from the first injury and what's from the second injury? That would be really easy to see. Now, the reason why I say that is, one, the mechanic would have to know what is possibly damaged here and be able to evaluate it. 2, they'd have to be able to evaluate in the second, they'd have to keep good evidence of, hey, this is what the first was. And then again, I don't have a picture of this. Ideally, I have a picture of the same car with more damage here. But if they had the second damage, they would have to be able to do a simple workup to explain exactly what the second damage was to the car. Now, that would be insanely easy to do. There's not any of you that couldn't do this. All right, it's no different. So we call this no pre-existing condition. This is pristine. This is new. It's never had an injury before. We're calling this an active pre-existing condition. This is what you're working on. Now, we could have this active pre-existing condition, have another injury put on top of it. We broke out the window. We sprung the hood. We sprung the door. We have pictures of the first. We have pictures of the second. Easy peasy. No matter what, we fix it, and now we have what's called a dormant pre-existing condition. Now, I'm going to show you the law and the legal terms as we go. That's all the harder it is. So if we say, look, in the spine, and we're going to deal with connective tissue injuries, we say trauma 1, disc herniation, 1 level. That's called trauma 1. Now, if we have the second injury, like I'm saying with this car, if that has a second injury on top of this injury that's not been repaired, and we looked at it and said, wow, farther disc herniation here, that's called an aggravation to an active pre-existing condition. If we said, wow, no disc herniation at this level, new disc herniation now, that is a completely new injury, and it's devoid of a pre-existing condition. Just like if we broke the windshield in the second accident, that broken windshield is a new injury. It's new trauma to the car. So the reason why I'm using this is hopefully so it's really, really simple. One of the things I'm very good at, and I got very good at it from spending years in this market, is trying to figure out simpler and simpler ways to explain something so that you totally get it. Now, that's on the disc. Remember, we said there's disc, there's support ligament damage, and there's fracture. I'm not going to talk about the fracture, but let's take a support ligament. Okay, let's say that in the support ligament testing, we found that there was a significant injury in the upper cervical spine, injury 1. 2 weeks later, The patient 3 weeks later is in another accident, and this is test 2. This is completely new. That's new injury. That's old injury, which hasn't changed a bit. So we don't even have much of an aggravation to this area. We have a brand new injury here. Okay, that's how easy it is in the spine. But you have to understand there's only 3 injuries. You're only working with fracture, excessive motion, and disc herniation. That's what you're working with. Now, again, tonight is about pre-existing conditions and me taking a small slice of a topic in the injury space and simplifying it. Now, without a disc workup, I don't know if the disc is damaged. This is a picture. So if I didn't take a picture of this car, somebody could say it's not injured. So if I don't do an MRI, I cannot tell how badly damaged the disc is. So if I decide not to order an MRI, I'm basically saying to the world, there is no disc injury. For the support ligaments to the spine, there is no way to determine how badly damaged they are without an excessive motion test. That's not possible, right? So if I didn't do an excessive motion test, I'm telling the world that the ligaments in the spine are not damaged. Now, if I do the test, I'm telling the world that I believe that they are damaged, and I'm going to get a test, and that test is going to show results. Now, again, tonight is not about trying to educate you on excessive motion testing or on MRI or disc findings. This is about pre-existing conditions, but I got to start with a basis of your understanding of the injury before I could ever explain pre-existing conditions. Because if you don't know what the existing condition is, it's impossible for me to train you on pre-existing conditions. All workups, if you call me and you tell me you have a problem with the workup because somebody's saying pre-existing condition, it's almost always 100% of the time a documentation issue that you have, right? So explaining these things is really simple. Now, just to go back, if I had 2 accidents to this car, right? And I've now rehabilitated the car. When I've rehabilitated the car, it now has dormant pre-existing conditions. Let's say I went to a shop and the shop was really bad. Matter of fact, they decided they weren't going to put in this metal because they could get away with putting in Bondo, and they know how to make these parts in Bondo. Now it looks to you like it's metal, looks like to everybody else, but they did Bondo. Okay, it's still a dormant pre-existing condition. Now let's say the next person comes along, low impact, and damages the hell out of this car. Okay, is the new injury from the pre-existing condition? No, the new injury is 100% from the new trauma, 100%. And I'm going to show you in the spine, it's the same. The law says it's exactly the same. Hey doctors, if you like the information they're getting and you want to get updates on when we drop more information into this channel, just hit the subscribe button below. And also, if you would, like us. Also, if you're interested in our program, you'll see there's a link below where you can schedule a one-on-one consult call with one of my team members. Just hit the link below. So let me take another example. If a person is injured and they're hit, this is actually an auto injury. And let's say they're hit and they damage their knee. Well, we would call that a leg injury, or we could call it a lower extremity injury, or we could call it a knee sprain. Let's say they have a bad knee sprain, bad ligament damage in the knee. Okay, let's say that they had prior serious injuries in the ankle and they have severe degenerative change in the ankle. Is anyone going to give any doctor with the fresh knee injury the runaround that it was caused by this pre-existing degeneration that's really bad in their ankle? The answer is insanely no. And this is insanely simple to explain. Okay, now when I say it's insanely simple, for many of you, you're going to need to see this a few times. You might just see this. You might need to run into this information a little bit or have some training on it, right? So it becomes really easy, but you have all of the foundation of this understanding with your background and your experience. So here's the thing. The reason why this is so easy is because there's long bones and these joints are separated by long bones, right? So there's 30 joints here. There's 31 joints here. So one of the other things we have to know is we have to know the real estate of the spine. I wouldn't come in and say, if all I said was, well, they got a lower extremity sprain, that doesn't identify where. Now, as an attorney, I can say, well, hell, it's all because of the degenerative change in the ankle. Oh, God, you got me. Damn, there's degenerative change in the lower extremity. What am I going to do? Oh, my God, this is so bad. And I don't know how to explain it to the attorney. And it's so tough. And obviously, I'm being very dramatic here, right? Okay, the ease in which you can navigate that is the ease in which you navigate pre-existing conditions in the spine. It's just as easy. Now, again, we have to know the injuries. So right now, if a person were in an auto accident and this equipment was in their spine, are they going to damage this motion unit? The answer is no, not unless they have severe trauma and the screws are uprooted. Okay, that would be a catastrophic injury. We're not talking about those tonight. We're talking about your everyday spinal soft tissue injuries. That's what we're talking about, right? So if this is not really possible to really badly injure this, right? Now it is possible to injure it, and we would call that what? An aggravation to a dormant pre-existing condition, especially if this wasn't being treated at the time of the injury. This happened 6 years ago. This patient's never seen a doctor since. So where would the injuries be? The injuries would be up in these joints. Okay, so let's say it's a severe injury here. Is there any pre-existing condition here? This is like the ankle and the knee. There is no pre-existing condition here. So, and this is also where the force is going to go through the joints. Remember, when you have an auto accident, part of the reason why you can have less injury is because all of the joints participate in absorbing the shear force. Well, if I take joints out that can't participate, the energy goes more specifically into the healthy joints. Now, if I know that, that's insanely simple injury information. If I know that, and by the way, knowing that takes like literally 10 seconds. If I know that, then you know it's quite easy. Now, when I say 10 seconds, it took me 20 years to know it. 10 seconds to re-know it after I knew it, right? So now it's the same for this, right? Are these joints going to be stiffer or are they going to be more mobile? They're going to be a lot stiffer. Is this a pre-existing condition? Yes, it is. Probably it's a dormant pre-existing condition, and it's probably caused from trauma, a past trauma. Is it actively being treated at the time of the accident? Nope, it's not. When we look for injuries, are we going to look more here or more here? We're going to look here, just like we do if it was completely fused. This is working its way into a complete fusion. And it's working its way into a complete fusion due to acceleration from an old ligament injury. So the first thing I want to do is go, well, gosh, again, I've got serious damage up in here. I don't have any pre-existing condition here. Again, what I try to do, this is the ankle and the knee. The spine is a humongously large piece of real estate. It's a lot of parts. Just like the car has different parts, right? This is the windshield. This is the front end, right? So if I'm going to look for further damage, I have to know the injuries themselves in order to do what I'm talking about. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to shift into, and at the end, I'll open it up to questions and answers. You can ask me any questions you want to. So I'm going to start to shift into what the law says. Because once you understand the injuries and you understand what the law says, then it becomes even easier. So in the law, it's going to state, tell you what, I'm going to go, it's going to state, got a little bit of slide sequence problem. All right, I'm going to explain something. This has got no DJD. This has got an excessive motion test. that is severe. So there's a severe injury right here. There is no pre-existing condition problem here. If the patient hasn't been actively under treatment for this, and this was actively identified specifically for the treatment, they have no pre-existing condition. They have a dormant pre-existing condition, and it's not part of causation analysis. So they also have, if they have and can have, a possible surgical patient. So with this level of instability, surgical guidelines say that this pre-authorizes the patient for a spinal fusion surgery. Okay, now you're gonna stabilize this. You're gonna do treatment for this. But if you don't know how to explain that this is the injury, yeah, pre-existing problems come from an inability to understand the injuries themselves and then be able to articulate them. So tonight, I'm just showing you one little piece of severe ligament damage. Now, where is it? It's up in here. So when we say up in here, we need to define these terms. Active pre-existing condition means the following. The patient has a condition. Condition is basically defined as an abnormal or illness, injury, abnormal health condition. So the patient has a condition that's been determined to be a clinical cause of their problem that they are actively being treated for prior to an aggravation or exacerbation to that area. So that's an active, this would be a dormant, or this would be an active pre-existing condition currently because it's being treated, but not because of previous. Dormant pre-existing condition means the patient has a pre-existing condition such as DJD, which is not active at the time of injury. This means it was not actively being treated, and there was no evidence of a problem. So an active pre-existing condition would be, hey, I've got this car, and it already had damage to the front end. The guy never got it fixed. Now I got another injury on top of it. So I've got an active pre-existing condition, and now I've got a new injury on top of it. So dormant pre-existing condition means, hey, if this person has this condition, but it's not being actively treated at the time of the accident, you'll see in the law, it is not part of causation analysis. So we have this term called aggravation. Aggravation is a permanent worsening of a pre-existing condition, a physical, chemical, biological, or other factor which results in an increase of symptoms, signs, or impairment. Impairment is a derangement of a body part. That's what impairments are. Every single impairment in any impairment guide is a derangement of a body part. So this thing is a worsening of a pre-existing condition, a physical, chemical, biological, or other factor which results in an increase of symptoms, signs, or impairment that never returns to baseline, or what would have been except for the aggravation. So what that's stating there is most aggravation. So if I aggravate this dormant pre-existing condition, I could say it's an aggravation to a dormant pre-existing condition. If I say dormant pre-existing condition, I'm saying the condition was there. It's there from the past, but it wasn't actively being treated at the time of the injury. So if there's an aggravation to a dormant pre-existing condition, oftentimes this patient will not go back down to baseline. Or if they do, it's very slow. It's not like an exacerbation, which is a temporary worsening of a pre-existing condition, following a transient increase in symptoms, signs, disability, or impairment. The person recovers to his or her baseline status. So what happens with an exacerbation is the patient comes back to baseline very quickly. So this is the case. You're in an auto accident. You're treating low back condition. The person actually decides a month into care, hey, I'm going back into the weight room. I like to do squats. They do some squats. They come back in and say, wow, my back is sore. Good. 2 days later, they're right back to where you had them. That's an exacerbation. It's not a new injury. Right? Now, let's say that they actually went, wow, I think I popped something in my back when I was doing my lifting. Okay. And now You say, okay, we're going to see how that goes, but it doesn't go back to baseline and it's really slowing their recovery. You have a new injury. So this is just how simple this is. Now, proximate cause is a legal term. Proximate cause means that a cause means a cause which is in direct sequence, unbroken by any new independent cause. So guy's in an auto accident, he hurts his neck, right? But he goes to work as a roofer 3 days later and he falls off the roof and falls on his neck. No exam. After the auto accident, he comes in now to you and says, hey, I really injured my neck. Okay, you have a chain that's been broken. It's very difficult to determine what the cause of the trauma that you're now going to work up is from. Was it from the car? Was it from the fall on the roof? You don't know. That's because proximate cause has been broken. That doesn't happen very often. Okay, in Gilbert Law Summaries, basically, this is a book that all of us that study law study. It says, as long as the chain of causation is proved, any sort of hospital, medical, or therapeutic care is recoverable. Now, in Washington Supreme Court, state of Washington, this is pretty much the same in every state. I'm pulling up a state Supreme Court. Next, I'll pull up a federal ruling for federal law. It says, Washington courts have held in the past, where there is no evidence a pre-existing condition is causing pain or disability close to the time of traumatic injury is sustained, the at-fault party is liable for 100% of all subsequent treatment bills and damages when the incident lights up the dormant or asymptomatic pre-existing condition. In other words, when an abnormal condition is present but inactive and not requiring active care, there is nothing that requires any apportionment of the injuries or treatment caused following the new trauma. The trauma is solely responsible from a medical legal perspective. The rule is that when the latter condition itself does not cause pain, the latter being the pre-existing condition that's dormant. So when the latter condition itself does not cause pain, suffering, or disability, but the condition plus an injury brings on pain, suffering, or disability by aggravating the pre-existing condition and making it active, then the injury and not the dormant condition is the proximate cause of the pain and disability. Thus, the party at fault is held for the entire damages as a result. Now, remember, that's when we're dealing with a pre-existing condition. If the knee didn't have a pre-existing condition in that auto accident, but the ankle did, there's no pre-existing condition to contend with in the knee, although there is a lower extremity pre-existing condition. So same thing in the spine. If I have severe degeneration at C5, C6, and C7, but I have severe ligament damage at C2, C3, and C3, C4, there is no degeneration up in those joints. I have a new injury to an area that doesn't even have a pre-existing condition. Now, the problem is that we have bulked as a profession everything into, we just say it's a neck injury. That's just as bad as if your kid came home after he had a bad leg injury. They went to the hospital, they worked it up, they went to the best doctor, and the doctor said, you know what, your kid's got a lower extremity injury. How specific is that? Well, calling something a neck injury is just as unspecific, because you have to know what is injured in that neck. So this is Maurer versus the United States. It's a settled principle. This is what we learned in law when I did my thesis on pre-existing conditions. This is one. It is a settled principle of tort. Tort is injury law, that when a defendant's wrongful act causes injury, he is fully liable for the resulting damage, even though the injured plaintiff had a pre-existing condition that made the consequences of the wrongful act more severe. Now watch how they, even at this top level, how they marry in now active pre-existing condition and aggravations to it. So they say the plaintiff's recovery for damage caused by the defendant's wrongful act may not be proportionally reduced because of the pre-existing weakness or susceptibility to injury, such as an osteoarthritic condition or a weakness caused by a previous injury. Now, it says there's two exceptions. However, there are two exceptions to this general rule. First is when a plaintiff is incapacitated or disabled prior to an accident, the defendant is liable only for the additional harm or aggravation that he caused. So if a person is incapacitated, that's an ongoing, active, pre-existing condition. That's like the person's driving around with that car and they never got it fixed from the first accident. They have an ongoing, active, pre-existing condition, or they're disabled. Well, if you're disabled, if it's a permanent disability, you're disabled permanently, that's an ongoing problem. That's an active condition. So the only thing that the insurer or anybody else is liable for is the aggravation or the new injury or the new damage you caused to this incapacitated or disabled body. Now, it also says, second, when a plaintiff has a pre-existing condition that would inevitably worsen, this is what insurers always want to say. No, this would inevitably worsen. This is what's causing it. A defendant causing subsequent injury is entitled to have the plaintiff's damages discounted to reflect the portion of the damages that would have been suffered even in the absence of the subsequent injury. But here's the kicker. Where's the burden of proof? The burden of proof in such cases is upon the defendant to prove the extent of damages that the pre-existing condition would inevitably have caused. Nobody can prove that. So basically, I'm saying this spinal degeneration right here is the cause of everything, even the cause of headaches, even though this would not cause headaches, right? But I would have to say that I would have to take into court and I would have to prove that because this was there, okay, the burden of proof in such cases is on the defendant to prove the extent of the damages that the pre-existing condition would inevitably have caused. So I have to prove that this condition would have caused everything that's involved with that spine. So again, I'd have to take the ankle sprain and I'd have to prove that it would have caused the knee injury. It's impossible. So this is a very steep condition. And it's more on the dramatic side of the disabled or somebody that has severe injuries that already active. Okay, so that is what I wanted to share with you tonight on pre-existing conditions. In a second, I'm going to open it up to question and answers. What I'm going to tell you is that we have a lot of resources. So I have a program where I train lawyers called the Smart Injury Lawyers Program, and it's becoming pretty quickly known out there in the legal profession. Now, I also have a Smart Injury Doctors program where I teach doctors the information I'm sharing tonight and a whole lot more, so you can expand into your injury services. I'm going to tell you right now that if you're not expanding into your injury services, we're in a recession. I don't know if you realize it. We're in a recession, and that recession is going to get a lot worse. If I'm wrong, so be it. In the injury space, there is no recession. So the injury space can pull practices through a severe economic downturn. In case you've noticed, people are not going to have as much money. And that's going to get worse. That's not going to get better. And I don't care blue or red, or if we had a red wave or a blue wave, if the damage has already been done, it's going to take a while for anybody to repair it. So the injury space, for some of you, 2, 3, 4 injury patients a month, pulls you through that condition easily. If you want information about our program, you call 800-940-6513, and we'll set you up and show you our program. If you want more information or you want more education, I have a Smart Injury Doctors podcast. You want to listen to that? It's on Spotify, it's on Apple, it's on Google, it's on a lot of different platforms. And I also have a Facebook private group. It's not member only. You don't have to be invited, but we have to approve you to come into it. It's called the Smart Injury Doctors Practice Building Success Secrets. And you go out and you can get more educational material like what I'm sharing with you tonight. Okay, so I'm going to stop sharing at this point, and I'm going to go back to, I'm going to go to a view, actually. So mute all current. Okay, you should be able to unmute yourself. Now I'm going to go to a gallery view. All right, so if you've got a camera, turn it on. If you don't have a camera, that's fine. And I want you to, we have a lot of doctors on this call tonight. So what I want you to do is go ahead and just, if you have a question, just go ahead and unmute yourself. And what I want you to do is ask me whatever question you have a question with. So I'm here, whatever the questions are, trust me, I've been doing this a really long time. I do a lot of attorney education. I do a lot of training for doctors and depots, all kinds of things. And so you're not gonna just ask away. If you have questions, ask away. Okay, anybody have any questions? You're all like super comfortable with pre-existing conditions. You don't have any problems. You're getting paid full boat. You're having a really easy way of showing your level of expertise, so you can get a lot of attorneys that want to have relationships with you. And so that's pretty much where you're at. I would say, great, you probably don't have any questions, right? The same information I'm talking about tonight can generate you lots of medical referrals. We have providers in our program. We have a provider in our program that sees 220 unattached patients a month. Now, what they know very well is what I just taught. Now they know a lot of the other things, the same thing where I'm saying, hey, this is not I'm not giving you a full-blown education on the injuries themselves or impairment or anything else. I'm just giving you an educational opportunity tonight on just the pre-existing conditions. Go ahead. Anybody have any questions at all?
I have a comment.
Yeah, go ahead. Dan Shapiro.
I have a comment to make.
Yes.
I started working with Dr. Cronk many years ago. And
by the way, Dan, identify yourself. You're not a doctor.
Yeah, I'm not a doctor. I'm an attorney.
He's an attorney. Go ahead.
Yeah, I'm on the edge of retiring, but I'm an attorney. I've been doing this for 30 some odd years. And my settlements that I got once I connected with Dr. Cronk tripled or quadrupled or 10 times what they used to be, just by employing the information and the techniques that he is trying to tell you guys about. So I would encourage you very much to get with the program and make sure that your attorneys that you work with also get involved. It's amazing. The claims adjusters are aware of it, and they don't say anything unless you bring it up.
You know, so I appreciate, I appreciate you. I appreciate what you do. The other thing I'd ask or say to you is, if you have a doctor that can do what I just did, that's gold, right?
Right.
Okay, so it's just gold. So when I said, look, the blind are leading the blind. If you can see, you can lead your whole local community. It's not hard. Right? But you have to start. You have to start with whatever your area is, or the thing that you're not comfortable with. You gotta shore that up. And I'm just displaying, when I go through when I go through pre-existing conditions, I'm just displaying some things that you might need to understand in order to get it as simple as what I just explained it. So let's go though on pre-existing conditions or anything, challenges you had with an attorney, challenges that you have. I'll open it up to any questions. If we don't have questions, it's totally fine. I've been pretty much going since about 5:30 this morning, and I'm on Eastern time. So I don't know what it is, 8:30, 9 o'clock. So now the reason why we go, why I go like that is when they say, when the sun shines, make hay. The injury space is the most incredible and lucrative space to be in. It is recession proof. So we're doing incredibly well. The reason why I work those hours is because it's never been better, especially as for us, the recession is bad, friends, family, and everything else. For the space I'm in, the recession is like gold. And if you don't understand what I'm saying or why I'm saying that, please ask me a question. Okay? Because I want to help you. I want to help you if I can. I'm also going to look to see if anybody's got a raised hand, because you can also raise your hand. Nope. Okay. Usually I generate some questions.
I do have a question.
Yeah, go ahead, David.
It's a little off topic, but what is the cost of sending some stress films into Spinal Kinetics?
540 an area.
540.
Yep.
Okay.
And that's on the stress testing.
Okay.
That's the only one you had? That's pretty simple.
I have
Do
more,
you,
but
do you do stress testing? Do you do stress testing?
I send everybody out for flexion extension films, but I don't have a good way to analyze. I can measure it myself and say it's more than 8 degrees.
Yeah, no, I totally get you. So the only thing I'm going to tell you is if you sent out for an MRI, but you didn't get an MRI read, you don't really, what's the value of the MRI?
Right.
Yeah. So if you don't have a good way of excessive motion testing, you can do it yourself. There's softwares out there you can use. You can use Posture Ray is the one that I like.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's the one I like the most.
Yeah.
What I'm going to tell you is experience for me, experience wise. So for 17 years in private practice, my last 8, I've got heavy into injury work. And I always wanted the study to be done in an unbiased, independent manner because I was using the results. When you understand surgical guidelines, impairment guidelines, athletic return to play parameter guidelines, treatment guidelines, and how this all ties in, I wanted, the results are so significant that I wanted them unbiased, right? Because that way for me, I could use them even more. My
Right.
credibility went up, my professionalism went up. I'm not experiencing the trauma or the problems that I'm experiencing with the lawyers that I might if I'm doing it internally.
Yeah.
You follow?
Right.
So
The
yeah.
area I work in, the attorneys don't push themselves, I guess. I guess the one that I work with right now, they're not pushing themselves into ligament injury or even concussion or head trauma. They just don't.
Good. So let me set something up for you.
Okay.
When I said the blind leading the blind,
Yeah.
okay, Dan Shapiro's on. He's an attorney that studies the condition that he represents. That's rare. So lawyers, and I'm not saying this in an antagonistic way or anything else, but attorneys in the personal injury space are the only attorneys generally that do not study the condition that they represent.
Okay.
So explain that. If I'm hurt, David and I are in a contract, he breaks the contract and it hurts me. I'm going to hire a contract attorney and all they study is contract.
Right.
They go to seminars on contracts. They study contracts. They look at language for clauses. They geek out on that stuff.
Right.
If I go to an asbestos law firm, okay, they're going to know where's the asbestos, how does it accumulate? Where does it accumulate in the body? How do you test for it? How do the other comorbidities or active pre-existing conditions engage into it? They're going to know everything there is to know about it. Personal injury attorneys do not know the injuries that they represent. They're common thing. We sell programs now a lot based on this concept because they get it.
Right.
Okay, so what they're going to say to you, David, is they're going to say, look, it's just you. You know, we rely on you, the doctor. I don't really need to know that.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's like a car salesman. Because remember, they're selling the injuries to the insurers.
Right.
They're the ones that are selling the injury. They're not going to court as much, right? 1%, 99% of the time they're settling it. So they're insurance settlement brokering the deal. They're selling the injuries. Now they want that insurer to spend $100,000, $500,000. In the last, I don't know how, since July, so however many months that's been, since July, I'm aware of and partially participated in 2 settlements that settle, one for 6.8 million, one for 6.2 complete spinal instability cases.
Wow. Now,
what I'm telling you is, and I never care, I do not care about settlements. That's Dan's heard me probably say this before. He always goes, what? I don't care about settlements. What I care about is the patient and the condition that the patient has. The settlement process, that's Dan Shapiro's job. My job is to document in a way that allows the patient access to any benefits they're entitled to. Their job is to decide what those benefits are.
Okay.
So I'm a junkie for that. Now, the only reason why I say those settlements is when you have a large settlement, something had to communicate. right? Because you don't get that settlement unless people really understood what the hell somebody was saying,
Right.
right?
Right.
So what I'm saying to you is a long about way of saying it is very easy to educate attorneys.
Okay.
And just like Dan would be an example, or others, or I could play you testimonials of attorneys where it was like when they start to see what you're doing that's different, but you explain it differently. You can't go, well, here's a spinal kinetics CRMA report, or gosh, this person has ligament damage. I did that for years, 2.5 years. I trained attorneys, and finally one day I said, hey, big group, what's a ligament? Crickets. Right? It was like, holy crap, have I been over their heads?
Yeah.
Way over their heads.
Right.
And that's why they don't get it. So one of the things I'm really good at is getting them to get it.
Okay.
So that's part of, in our program, we teach doctors how to go out and disrupt relationships in their market so that they can improve their relationships, but how to simply state, look, we pick up the severe injuries that are picked up on MRI, the ones the attorneys sort of know about, and the severe injuries that are not picked up on MRI.
Okay.
Now that's always going to generate a question. What's not picked up on MRI? Because they think everything's on, it be all end all is the MRI.
Yeah.
Now here's another one for you to think about, David.
Okay.
All right, for anybody on the call. All right, I'm in an auto accident, and somehow there is a smart bomb of energy, and it only hit the disc. How in the hell is that possible? Right now, when you hear that, you go, whoa, that makes sense. Wow, I got it. Yes, that's impossible.
Yeah.
Okay, so when you say it to an attorney, they do the same thing. Right? Oh my God, that doesn't make sense. And that tissue's deep. Why wouldn't the other tissue? Why wouldn't the tissue? So it's not hard.
Yeah.
When I say it's not hard, like it took me 20 years of over educating and complicating and over talking them and doing all kinds of stuff wrong.
Right.
And hard. That part was hard. Now at this point, oh my gosh, it's super easy. Largest law
Okay.
firms in the country or the smallest, or it's really easy. So
Okay.
if that's something you might want to check us out, if that's something you want help with.
Totally. My other question is, I'm going to probably go to trial on a case where she had lots of pre-existing conditions. I mean, like they look at the MRI. She had an MRI maybe 6 months before the accident, and then an MRI afterwards, and they say no change. There's no change.
Good. So the thing I'm going to tell you is that the main injury, the biggest injury that gets missed. I'm going to play something for you guys. Just like anybody that watches or comes on a program with me knows that I'm liable to jump around a little bit. So I'm going to see if I can't pull something up. Can you all see my screen?
Yes.
Okay. I'm going to try to pull up. Let me see if I got one. Yes. Okay. So you all can see my screen right now, right?
Yes.
All right. This is a Journal of Prolotherapy. Now this is good because this is, and again, this isn't a full education on what I'm showing you. This is a snippet.
Right.
Right. It says the ligament component. Now we got to remember, usually I'll have somewhere in a slide for somebody when they say the ligament component, they're talking about the 9 ligaments around the disc. So they say the ligament component of spinal stability is related to the support, health, and proper function of these tissues, and often overlooked as a major, if not the major, source of pain and ultimate degeneration. The case can be made that excess use or even complete dependence on the MRI has focused too much attention on the intervertebral disc and the vertebrae themselves to the exclusion of the ligaments and the facet joint capsules. That's your legal profession right now. Okay, now I do a program that I teach doctors to do all over the country for this attorney. And this is back when I was still really wordy. Like I don't have it refined like I did today. Right. So he suffered. He didn't know he suffered because he got a quite good result with this. But so he's a great trial attorney, still up there today. He does nothing but ligament injuries now in the spine. So he's up there. He hears me talk about these injuries, these non-disc injuries,
Yeah.
these support ligament injuries. So he says, okay, great. I got a 15-year-old girl. The 15-year-old girl has got severe symptoms, 2 years into it, 8 weeks out in Minnesota. Everyone has an MRI. 8 weeks out, she has no disc herniation. It's a completely clean MRI. He hears us. He sent out for a motion study. They sent it to our company, Spinal Kinetics, which, just to separate out, I'm the CEO of Spinal Kinetics. That's completely imaging and diagnostics. We don't do any training or anything else there.
Yeah.
I have another company called Smart Injury Doctors where I do training. So they sent it out to Spinal Kinetics. Person has severe rateable. Rateable means they qualify in the AMA guides. It means that they qualify for spinal fusion surgical procedures. Severe rateable in both angular and translation findings. Listen to what he has to say.
Doctor, let me explain what opened my eyes to the situation was after listening to you. I had Gina's case. Gina was a 15-year-old that was in a car accident, and her chiropractor did an MRI 2 to 3 months post-accident that showed up perfectly normal. 2 years later, Gina is still having significant cervical pain. And I used that as my first test case. We had x-rays done. In that particular case, they were done by motion x-rays, but digital motion x-rays. And your Spinal Kinetics did the assessment, the computerized assessment and evaluation, and turned out that she had significant and rateable objective findings of significant motion segment integrity, both in her case, both angular and translational. Yeah. And I decided to go back and have her have an MRI done a little more than 2 years later. And all of a sudden, this 15-year-old spine that had been imaged by MRI right after the accident as totally normal shows the degeneration of a 45 to 50-year-old lady.
So David, it's an example where when I teach something, I also show it.
Right.
Do you know what I mean? So it's to
Right.
teach and show. So on your case, you've got this case that's going to court, and they've got the MRI findings from the first, and they got the MRI findings from the second. And I'm assuming the second accident was probably worse or more traumatic. And so you have no findings there, and you probably don't have a first excessive motion test and a second motion test.
No, I just have a second one because she hurt her back and had the MRI, so it wasn't an accident. But she'd been in the end accident was the 7th accident. She had been in multiple accidents, so they're looking at her going, "You've been in multiple accidents. You know what to say. You know what to do," and not going. And I told her attorney when we went to lunch, I said, "No, that's me. I've been through Croft. I've been through Dan Murphy's thing. I've done a little bit of Studdens." And I've said, "No, I've asked the right questions." And yeah, she got the whole book of diagnoses thrown at her. So,
Yeah. So I get that, David, but I'm like one of these I'm like super simple guys.
yeah,
So again, if the spine is damaged, let's
Yeah.
just take the spinal injury. If the spine is damaged, because we could say cord injury or nerve injury, those are other types of injuries, and there are other types of ways you work them up. But let's just say the spine.
Yeah.
Okay. If she didn't fracture in the first one and she didn't fracture in the second one, fractures out.
Yep.
Right. So it's only connective tissue.
right.
So if you didn't have an MRI on the first and an MRI on the second and an excessive motion test on the first and an excessive motion test on the second, you don't have the injury identified. It's impossible
Okay.
it's impossible to identify a support ligament injury without an excessive motion test. Just like it's
Okay.
impossible to determine a disc herniation without an MRI.
Okay.
Okay. So now that being said, you go, okay, well, gosh, what do I do now?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, like I'm really good also at assisting on depots to kind of go, okay, I'm a little weak here. How do I strengthen up? Even though if I ever do those with a doctor, one of the things I tell you is don't ever get in that weak position again.
Yeah.
Because the strong position in that position, lots of referrals, lots of stuff.
Right.
Right. And Dan, I think Dan's the top educator in the world. Dan Murphy.
Yeah, yeah.
Like every time I go to him, I go, oh my God, I'm still in
Makes you feel stupid. I know.
Oh
Yeah.
my God, it's stupid.
Yeah.
Right? I love it. And I like that
Yeah.
though.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
I sit my butt as much as I can in front of him.
Yeah.
Because I like that. That's, that's what challenges. Art was an expert at mechanism science. So mechanism science to me doesn't play a big role into things if you understand injury science. So
Right.
example of that, and not to belittle Art Croft or anybody else.
Yeah.
If I've got a gunshot wound, I could give a damn if the guy who's fixing me has ever studied guns.
Yeah.
Do you understand? I
Right.
just, the reason why we went so heavy into mechanism science is because we were getting beat up on the injuries, but we weren't identifying the injuries.
Gotcha.
So if we just identify the, that broken wrist that I showed you, if we just identify the injury
Right.
or the car, we identify the injury and then we identify the new injury and new damage. And
Yeah.
the only way you can do that for spine damage is excessive motion testing and disc herniation testing.
Okay.
Yeah, go ahead.
So like the 15-year-old case, she's female, but she just turned 40. Her accident was about 2 years ago, probably 2.5 now. And do you guys do motion studies for the lumbar?
Do this. Call the 800 number. So 800-940-6513. Write that down.
Okay.
And so what you would do is call me. They'll set you up with like a half-hour consult.
Wow.
Doesn't cost you anything. And what I'll do is kind of go through the particulars a little bit. So
Okay.
instead of on this call, like going through that, I'll just go through it with you real quick
Okay.
and just go, okay, yeah, this is what I would do. And most of the time when doctors take me up on this, they go, okay, yeah, that was good.
Yeah. Do you mind if I get the attorney on that call?
Do one with me and you first.
Okay.
Okay, do one with me and you first. That way
Okay.
I can pry in a way that I might not pry if you have your attorney on.
Okay.
Do
Okay.
you understand?
Yes, I understand.
Okay, good. I want to pry first before we ever
Okay.
Good.
Okay.
Okay, any other questions for you, David?
No, that's it. Thank you. Thank you for spending the time.
Yeah,
Okay.
no, you're totally welcome. Anybody else? Questions?
Yeah, Dan here.
Okay, hey, Dan.
Just a real quick thing. Before you just went through that, I was going to mention that impairment ratings with the x-rays and motion studies, that's the one thing that makes a huge difference in terms of the value of a case. But it also, the motion study revealed the ligament damage on several of my clients that the doctors were not paying attention to. And I had to educate my doctors after having you do the motion studies. It's amazing what a difference it makes. So
Dan,
with this group of people here, I'm just thinking maybe they don't know that how valuable that is, and you should probably let them know.
yeah. So what he's talking about, remember, an impairment is a derangement to a body part.
Right.
Okay, but if we don't do the motion test, we can't have the motion derangement. If we don't do the MRI, we can't have the herniation derangement. So we have to know the simplicity. So what Dan is saying, Attorney Shapiro is saying, is that the impairment and permanency of an injury is a huge driver. But what I really loved what he said, and this is what happens when I train attorneys, the first thing the attorneys ask almost always is, okay, where do I find a doctor? How do I find a doctor?
Yeah.
Right now in our program, we actually assist you with the educational process of those attorneys. So his problem, I love it when an attorney says, geez, I got a hard time with the doctors don't understand these injuries. Now I like it better when he finds doctors and things like that, which he does, but it's just, It's just kind of the state of things. So when I said, hey, the blind are leading the blind, but those that can see or even improve their vision can lead whoever they want to. Attorney Shapiro's not blind to these injuries anymore, so he can start to lead.
Mhm.
And the other thing I'm going to tell each and every one of you is the simpler they're understood and the simpler they're explained, the more powerful it is. So when you find yourself in a deposition, talking and talking and talking and talking, it's because you're trying to fill space. It's because you're taking something that's not totally certain in your world and you're trying to explain it and look very doctorly. And I know I used to do it myself and I was good at it. But after I started to understand the injuries, oh my God, is it simple? Now you sit there and it's extremely simple. But when it's that simple, it communicates and then it's extremely powerful. The other thing.
Exactly. Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah, go ahead, Dan.
The simplicity on what I was trying to say too is that it was by X-rays, not MRIs, where
Yep.
we could see that there were injuries that gave impairment ratings that were significant.
Yep.
Didn't
Yep.
show on the MRI.
Right.
Yeah, I'm sorry to interrupt. But
No, it's totally fine. I like it. So anybody else got any other questions? Any other question? I'm going to tell you right now, when you ask a question, everybody learns. And I promise I won't beat you up, right? I promise I won't make you feel bad or make you feel small or anything else. Everyone learns when somebody asks a question. So if somebody's got the courage, if you sit in their back there right now and going, oh yeah, I should ask them this question, but no, I don't know. Ask me the question. I promise I'll help you. So if there's any other questions, let me just check the chat once. I'm notoriously bad. Do you have any smart injury lawyers in Indiana? I don't know. You'd have to call us. I can't think of any right off the top of my head because that's the program that we're just starting. We've been in the doctor space for a long time and I'm just getting into the attorney space. I was rear-ended by a trash truck and need to find the best attorney in Indiana. Okay. Nothing comes to mind on that one. How does a plaintiff attorney in trial articulate the law regarding the existing conditions so they can make a correct decision? Good. I'm going to answer that question by saying you have a picture of the car with the first damage and you have a picture of the car with the second damage. It's not hard to articulate. It's just as easy to articulate if you have a picture of the first injury and you have a picture of the second injury. Or if you have a car that was fixed and it's had a history of being damaged, it was fixed and now it's dormant. And now you have a new injury on top of it in areas where it was never injured before. It's just as simple. Now, when somebody tries to run me around, there's no runaround. I'm coming right back to that truth. We're not getting off of that. And one of the things I do is teach you how to stay on offense, not defending things. Stay on offense. It's a blast when you can stay on offense, right? You'll have fun with it. Now, once I got really good at it, depositions went away. Trials went away. So once you get really good at it, that is a thing that can happen is it goes away. You're not, you have less. And today it's a lot different environment. There's a lot less of it, less depositions, less trials than there were, say, 15, 20 years ago. But it still is really, really fun. The only thing that's not fun of it is it disrupts your schedule. That's the only thing that's not fun about it. But it can be really easy. Okay, anybody else? Because I'm going to go on.
Yes, I have a question.
Go, Robert.
Yeah, hi. I'm having a really hard time listening. You're breaking up like 50% of the times. Will this be rebroadcasted or sent over to me?
Yes.
After the
Not sent to you, not sent to you directly, but it will be. We have a place.
Put it on. Perfect.
Yep.
Yeah, all right, that's great because I'm not getting half of the stuff. I'm learning a hell of a lot, but if I'm getting 50% on the dollar, I want 100% on the dollar. If you know what I'm saying, if you know what I mean.
They'll put out a communication.
I'll keep perfect. I'll keep my eye out. Thank you, doctor.
Yeah, you're welcome, Robert. Thanks for attending.
Absolutely.
Okay, guys. It's late for you guys. I don't know where you are. I guess if you're in California, it's not as late. So I'm gonna let you go. I really appreciate what you do. I appreciate you taking the time to listen to me tonight. Give me a little bit of your attention. I know it's valuable. Your time is valuable. So hopefully you got something out of this to make it worth your time sitting here and listening to it. I appreciate what you do, and I'll help you any way that I can. Rock and roll through this. I'm telling you, put your focus on injury, because that injury space is a really protective space. So you all have a good rest of the night. Take care.